this near Telegraph Bay?
Yes, kind of. There's two stacks which are right next to Telegraph Bay.
Yeah.
They're called the Twin Sisters. You've got Lanash, which is next to Telegraph Bay, and then Forkey, which is on the other side. You've then got Cocklohoo. Is if you keep going out to sea, it's about I think it's about 500 meters offshore, on the south coast. Beautiful stack. It's currently got breeding populations of guillemots. It's got razorbill. It's got fulmar, and it's got no rats, which is obviously very important for all of that.
Rats? Why are there rats on Baru?
There's no rats on Baru either, and that's actually what's so important about those two sites is they're rat free, compared to mainland Alderney, which has rats, and therefore there are no puffins breeding on mainland Alderney.
How the hell did we get rats here, man? That's crazy, isn't it?
Well, yeah.
Should we just get rid of the rats? I feel like we could get it done in a day.
If it was, yeah, I mean, look, if it was doable, then I think it would be a great project. That is a huge undertaking to eliminate rats from the whole of Alderney. You're talking about a big project. So they've done it in a couple of places in New Zealand, and they've done it in one of the islands of Scilly. And if there was appetite for it, then it would have huge benefit for our wildlife.
Should we do it?
Look, from a purely conservation point of view, well, yeah, it would be amazing, because all of a sudden, so rats have really negative impacts on the environment, right? It's not just seabirds. They're predating seabird chicks, etc. It's ground nesting birds, it's native mammals, it's our native reptiles like slow worms, it's native amphibians. They're basically fantastic predators. And actually, you asked about other species which have been a problem. Rats have done so well with humans. So, and also to put it in perspective, we have two species of rat in Alderney, black rat and brown rat. Neither are native. Okay, they've both come from Asia. Black rats, quite a long time ago, a couple of thousand years, still immeasurable time. So a couple of thousand years they came over, and then brown rats, we also call them Norway rats. They came over, I think it's around the 1800s, maybe a little bit earlier. They're called Norway rats because they came on Norwegian ships, again from the Far East.
God damn Norwegians, man. Yeah, this is crazy. I think I've only ever seen one rat on Alderney, down by the Duggy when I was a kid. Where the hell are these rats?
Yes.
Have you seen many?
Yeah. You do see them. Yeah.
Really? I mean, you obviously go out looking for all sorts of things. And where do you see most of the rats in Alderney?
Well, look, rats,
just everywhere.
They're foraging along the coastline, along the sea cliffs, especially so rat ecology is a bit interesting. So black rats, they're actually not present on Guernsey, black rats, and I don't think they have them on Jersey either. That's
God's sake,
that's because brown rats are big, beefy, scary things.
Okay, cool.
Black rats are a bit smaller. They're still they're still great predators, etc., and they're great climbers. But yeah, so black rats are actually better climbers than the brown rats. So in the UK, for example, black rats have only survived in like maritime areas, sea cliffs, ports, harbours. Everywhere else it's brown rats. We see the same here. So inland on Alderney, it's all brown rats. I'd expect them to be, around areas where there's chickens being fed. If anyone's got chickens, I'm sure they've had rat problems.
Near the Impo.
Near the Impo.
Or like near the recycling centre.
Rats will be anywhere where there's areas for them to hide, so especially big piles of stuff, be that compost heaps, rubbish piles, piles of wood, whatever, and where there's food.
Well, okay, so it's quite a challenge then to get rid of them.
Yeah, well, if you actually wanted to get rid of the rats, it's a serious project. And you'd also have to look at things like people keeping pets indoors while it's happening and things like that to make sure there's not any accidental bycatch.
Okay, well, we're not going to make any major changes on this podcast right now.
The positives of something like that would be huge.
Right, well, we can consider it, and we are in a changing times. But I love the fact that so the gannets and the puffins get along. Is that right?
I mean, they don't live in the same place. They don't hate.
They're neighbours.
So the puffins live on Baru, which is that low flat island, and they live in burrows. And then the gannets live on Lizardtag and Ortag, which are cliffy. Gannets are pedestal nesters, so they build a big pedestal and they'll nest on that. The puffins, burrow nesters, so they dig a burrow. There is a very close relative of puffins called a guillemot, which does live right next to the gannets. Guillemots, they look very similar to a puffin, but they're a little bit bigger, and they've got a pointy beak instead of that kind of classic curved beak. And they will nest just on the kind of rocky cliff face next to the gannets. They tend to go in areas where it's a bit too small for the gannets, because if a gannet decides to nest there, they're big, scary
Yeah,
buggers.
got no
And
choice.
yeah,
So, but like genuinely, do they like get along? Like, do they like if they're both next to each other, will they peck each other's eyes out, or they're
usually
chill?
they're okay, but gannets are feisty animals. Like,
Really?
if you look at Les Attack or any gannet colony, you'll notice that all the nests are about pecking distance apart.
Right.
Because if you're a gannet and you get too close to another one, you're getting it. And it's not unusual to see a gannet with, one eye,
Wow,
for good
really?
reason,
Oh no. So there's like gang wars and stuff going on within
Well,
their own
more like
colonies.
they pair for life, and they'll have their nest, and they are so defensive of that nest because that's their chick, that's their livelihood, that's everything
What?
for
They're
them.
monogamous.
Yeah,
They're
yeah, yeah,
completely
yeah.
monogamous birds.
Most seabirds are, so puffins are as well.
That's
Although
so sweet.
there is a divorce rate, which is, I think it's something like 10% or so. It's not nothing. But yeah, so seabirds, I think we were talking about it off air earlier. They have a life cycle where they invest very, very heavily in a low number of chicks. So for gannets and puffins, it's one a year. So each of those have one chick a year. And what goes often with that kind of life cycle is you also invest in a partner. It's the same as what people do, right? We invest in a partner, and they'll do that, and they'll do that year after year after year after year. So gannets can live up to around 40 years. In fact, the oldest gannet is from Alderney. It
Oh
was
wow.
from Les Attack. It was 39 years old. 39 and 7 months, I think, when it died.
Wow.
That was unfortunately an avian flu, which we don't necessarily need to touch on, but um, there's probably older gannets out there as well. That's just the oldest we've found. And there's some seabirds like fulmar, which are getting over 50, and then you've got albatross, which are, pushing 100. These seriously
Wow.
long-lived animals. Seriously
Interesting. So
long-lived.
do you know which couples are together, like the gannet couples? Do you know like Ron and Marjorie or whatever? Do you give them names? Is that a thing?
I don't. People usually, some people do, definitely, but
Because they all look the same to me. I mean, like, all birds. I mean, I get that they're species, but you must observe them so much with your surveys and obviously your drone work, which gives you a much better understanding of the sizes and stuff. But do you see any like any like couples?
Well, you'll see. So they'll obviously always go back to the same nest, or often they'll go back to the same nest. So you'll know, oh, that's that pair. But you've touched on something that's really interesting about seabirds, in that the males and females, it's very hard to tell the difference. Really, really, really hard to tell the difference, right? Compare that to, say, a peacock. You know what a male peacock is, or a pheasant. It's so obvious, or a chicken, right? But that's probably because they are pairing for life. The males and females both have to display how healthy they are. So those things that a peacock has, like those feathers, right? They're what we call like a sexual display. So that's a peacock saying, the male peacock saying, look how healthy I am. Look how healthy I am. It's a bit like a person buying a sports car saying, look, I can waste loads of money on a sports car. I can rear kids, right? For a peacock, I can waste loads of energy on these feathers. Therefore, I'd make a good father for these chicks, right? It's come mate with me, right? But for a gannet or a puffin, the males and the females have to prove it. And that's because, unlike a peacock where the peahen does all the work, the male comes in, mates, and then buggers off. With a gannet and a puffin, those guys, they're pairing for life. They're both putting in a huge amount of energy. The males are putting a huge amount of work in as well. So the males and the females have to prove their worth. So, for a puffin, it's a great example. That bill they've got, both males and females have that. And that bill is saying, I've got loads of energy to spare. I can invest in this bright, colourful bill. Therefore, I can rear chicks.